June 6, 1944, 7:25 a.m. Dog White Sector, Omaha Beach, Normandy. Salt spray mixed with blood as Brigadier General Norman Dutch Cota pressed himself into the shingle, his uniform already soaked with seawater and sweat. Amid the deafening roar of machine gun fire and crashing mortars, he scrawled a single line in his waterproof notebook with a trembling hand. "The plan has failed. Everything we prepared for is wrong. Now we must create victory from disaster." Raising binoculars cautiously above the seawall, he saw what contradicted every assurance given by Allied command. The beach was a slaughterhouse. Naval bombardment had failed, and American soldiers were being cut down in systematic waves. The 51-year-old general watched the pride of American youth die in the sand, their bodies washing back and forth in the crimson tide. In the pre-dawn briefing aboard USS Charles Carroll, Cota had warned his staff about confusion. But this wasn't confusion. This was annihilation. The vaunted Atlantic Wall stood unbroken. The defenders weren't demoralized conscripts, but battle-hardened veterans of the 42nd Infantry Division. The promised shell craters that would serve as cover simply didn't exist. The beach lay bare, swept by murderous crossfire that reached every inch of sand. Within 2 hours, 2,400 American soldiers would fall at Omaha Beach. The mathematics of defeat were being written in blood across 300 yards of open shoreline. None of them knew this moment would ignite one of the most remarkable battlefield reversals in modern military history, the transformation of certain defeat into decisive victory, sparked by one man's refusal to accept failure. This disaster had been months in the making, concealed beneath layers of optimistic planning and overconfident assumptions. As a senior advisor to Operation Overlord, Cota had been made Assistant Division Commander of the 29th Infantry Division, tasked with landing at Omaha. The 29th, a National Guard outfit nicknamed the Blue and Gray for its mix of Union and Confederate heritage, had never seen combat. They were to land beside the battle-tested 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, in what planners insisted would be a straightforward assault against demoralized defenders. But Cota knew better. A year earlier, at a conference on amphibious assaults, he had argued fiercely against the daylight landing. Strategical surprise will be impossible to attain, he warned. But tactical surprise is another thing. Tactical surprise is one of the most powerful factors in determining success. I therefore favor the night landing. I do not believe a daylight assault can succeed. His warnings were dismissed. High command, intoxicated by superiority in numbers and firepower, believed naval shells and aerial bombs would pulverize the Atlantic Wall. Troops were assured they would walk ashore against minimal resistance. Intelligence reports even suggested Omaha was held only by the 7th Static Division, second-rate troops, older men, and foreign conscripts. The truth was catastrophic. Unknown to Allied intelligence, the veteran 352nd Infantry Division had shifted into the sector weeks before the invasion. These were hardened men from the Eastern Front, supported by 88mm guns, mortar batteries, and interlocking machine gun nests that turned the beach into a killing ground. Among the men in the assault waves was Private Harold Baumgarten of Company B, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division. A 19-year-old from New York City, he had joined the National Guard to escape the monotony of civilian life. Now crammed into a landing craft with 30 other men, he watched the French coast loom larger through the gray dawn. The naval barrage, promised to last until H-hour, had already fallen silent. The beach ahead looked pristine, untouched, a very bad sign. Sergeant Robert Slaughter, Company D, 116th Infantry, remembered the final briefing. "They told us it would be a walkover. The Air Force would bomb the hell out of them. The Navy would blast them to kingdom come, and we'd just walk in and mop up." Some of the boys were actually disappointed. They thought they'd miss the real fighting. Captain Charles Corran, commanding Company K 116th Infantry, had been more skeptical, a college-educated Virginian who had risen through the National Guard ranks. He recognized the hallmarks of overconfidence, planning too precise, timetables too rigid, assumptions too optimistic. War, he knew from studying military history, never went according to plan. At 6:30 a.m., H-hour, the first wave hit the sand. Within seconds, the carefully orchestrated plan dissolved into chaos. German machine guns, untouched by the failed bombardment, opened from concealed positions in the bluffs. Invisible 88 guns began their deadly work. Company A, 11th Infantry, landing at Dog Green directly in front of the Vierville draw, ceased to exist as a fighting unit within 10 minutes. Of 20-30 men, only 18 would survive the day unscathed. Their company commander, Captain Taylor Fellows, was killed before he reached the sand. His second-in-command lasted 30 seconds longer. Private Harold Baumgarten's landing craft took a direct hit from an 88 gun, the cell 50 yards from shore. The explosion threw bodies and body parts across the compartment. Baumgarten, miraculously unhurt, found himself in water over his head, weighed down by 60 pounds of equipment. He stripped off his pack, inflated his life vest, and struggled for shore. Machine gun bullets whipped the water around him. The man to his left had his head blown off. The man to his right simply disappeared beneath the waves. On Dog White, where Cota would land, Company C 1116th Infantry lost half its strength before reaching the seawall. Men who made it across the 300 yards of open beach arrived without weapons, without ammunition, without officers, without hope. They pressed themselves against the 4-foot pile of stones that provided the only cover and waited to die. The Rangers of the 5th Battalion, elite assault troops trained for exactly this mission, fared no better. Lieutenant Colonel Max Schneider, the battalion commander, watched his lead companies torn apart as they attempted to scale the bluffs. The Rangers had been drilled never to stop moving, to push through anything. This was beyond anything they had been prepared for. At 7:25 a.m., Cota landed with part of the 116th in the second wave at Dog White. His LCVP came under heavy machine gun, mortar, and artillery fire. 3 soldiers were killed immediately on exiting the craft. The general was likely the oldest man to set foot on Omaha Beach that day, certainly the highest-ranking officer present in those crucial early hours. What Cota saw defied every prediction. Dead and wounded Americans lay sprawled on the sand and floating in the water. Discarded weapons, life vests, and personal effects littered the shore. Disabled tanks burned fiercely. Of 29 amphibious Shermans launched from the 721st Tank Battalion, 27 had sunk in the rough seas. The survivors were burning wrecks on the beach. Worse than the physical destruction was the collapse of will. Men huddled by the seawall were inert, leaderless, almost incapable of action. Their weapons fouled with sand and water, their resolve shaken by horrors they had seen. These were not cowards. They were young men thrust into a situation that bore no resemblance to their training or expectation. Cota's aide, Lieutenant Jack Shea, stayed close as they moved along the seawall. Shea, a 24-year-old from Tennessee who had been with Cota since England, had never seen the general hesitate. Now Cota stood still for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of the disaster. Then, without warning, he stood up. He just stood up. Shea would later recall, in the middle of all that fire, he just stood up and started walking along the beach like he was on a Sunday stroll. I thought he'd lost his mind. What happened next became military legend. With complete disregard for his own safety, General Cota moved up and down the fire-swept beach, reorganizing units and coordinating action. But he did more than organize. He turned defeated men into fighters by the sheer force of his presence. Finding a group of Rangers pinned near the seawall, Cota asked their unit. When told they were 5th Rangers, he spoke the words that would become their eternal motto. Rangers, lead the way. To another group of paralyzed soldiers. he said, what would echo through military history. Gentlemen, we are being killed on the beaches. Let us go inland and be killed. The dark humor cut through paralysis. If they were going to die, better to die trying than cowering. Cota did not only give speeches. When he found a captain unsure how to assault a German strongpoint, he personally demonstrated the technique. I'll tell you what, Captain. You and your men start shooting at them. I'll take a squad of men, and you watch carefully. I'll show you how to take a house with Germans in it. After clearing the position, he returned to the captain. Do you understand? Do you know how to do it now? I won't be around to do it for you again. I can't do it for everybody. Private First Class Charles Neighbor of Company C, 11th Scythe Infantry, witnessed Cota's effect on the battlefield. We were done, finished. Guys were crying, praying, trying to dig holes in the shingle with their helmets. Then this general comes walking up, walking in the middle of all that fire. He was smoking a cigarette like he was at a garden party. He looked at us and said, "What are you doing lying there now? Let's get the hell out of here." The psychological impact was immediate. If a general could walk upright through that fire, what excuse did enlisted men have for cowering? One by one, then in groups, men began to rise. At 7:50 a.m., Cota led the charge off Dog White between strong points WN 68 and WN 70, forcing gaps in the wire with Bangalore torpedoes and wire cutters. The first man through the gap was cut down instantly by machine gun fire. The men behind him froze. Cota realized he had to act. He leaped up, dashed across the road, and went through the gap. The sight of a general personally leading the assault electrified the men. They surged after him, up the bluff, and into the teeth of German fire. Sergeant Jack Richardson of the 5th Rangers remembered, "We'd been trained to be tough, to never quit, but that beach broke us. We were ready to quit. Then this old man, he seemed ancient to us, goes charging up the bluff like he's 20. What could we do but follow?" 20 minutes later, the 5th Rangers joined the push and blew more openings. By 9 more than 600 American troops had reached the top of the bluff, opposite Dog White, and were advancing inland. The breakthrough was not a single dramatic moment, but a series of small victories. A machine gun nest silenced here, a minefield crossed there. Each success fed the next. Men who had been paralyzed an hour earlier attacked German positions with desperate courage. Cota's action sent a psychological ripple across Omaha Beach. Word traveled along the seawall. Somebody had made it up the bluff. If one group could do it, others could too. On Easy Red, Colonel George Taylor of the 16th Infantry, 1st Division, inspired by reports of Cota's success, rallied his men with his own immortal words. "There are two kinds of people staying on this beach, those who are dead and those who are going to die now. Let's get the hell out of here." Small groups, often led by junior officers and NCOs, began infiltrating the bluffs at multiple points. They ignored planned routes. Those were death traps. Instead, they made their own paths, blew gaps in wire, cleared mines with bayonets, and climbed the bluffs like mountain goats. Technical Sergeant William Wiedefeld of the 1116th described the shift. It was like watching men come back from the dead. 1 minute they're beaten, finished the next minute they're fighting like demons, all because one general showed them it could be done. The reversal at Omaha can only be understood through the eyes of those who lived it. Each man had his own journey from defeat to action, but all were united by Dutch Cota's presence. Private First Class Felix Brem, Company K, 116th Infantry. I was lying behind a dead soldier using his body for cover. I'd given up. I was waiting for my turn to die. Then I see this general walking along the beach. He stops right in front of me and says, "Son, you're not doing any good there. Let's go kill some Germans. How do you say no to that?" Sergeant Lawrence Fitzsimmons, 5th Rangers. We were Rangers, elite troops, best of the best. But that beach broke us. We'd lost half our officers in the first 10 minutes. Then Cota shows up and says we should lead the way. It wasn't just an order, it was a challenge. He was saying, "You call yourselves Rangers, prove it." And by God we did. Captain Joseph Dawson, Company G, 16th Infantry. I'd gotten my company up the bluff on the eastern end. We were the first ones up, but isolated, taking heavy fire. Then we saw troops coming up to our west. Cota's breakthrough. Suddenly, we weren't alone anymore. The whole beach was moving. Lieutenant Walter Taylor, Company B, 116th Infantry. My company had ceased to exist. I had maybe 20 men left out of 200. We were finished. Then Cota appears and says, "Lieutenant, get these men moving." I said, "General, we've lost all our officers, most of our NCOs, and our weapons are full of sand." He looked at me and said, "Lieutenant, I don't care if you have to throw rocks at them. Get moving." So we did. The contrast between plan and reality, between defeat and the eventual victory, defines D-Day at Omaha. The plan, naval bombardment, would create massive craters for cover. The reality, the beach was flat and exposed. The plan, bombing would destroy German position. The reality, cloud cover forced bombers to drop inland, missing targets. The plan, DD tanks would provide covering fire from the water. The reality, 27 of 29 tanks sank in rough seas. The plan, second-rate garrison troops would offer token resistance. The reality, the veteran 352nd Infantry Division waited. The plan, assault troops would advance on marked routes. The reality, every planned route was a killing field. The expectation, generals would command from ships offshore. The reality, Cota personally led the assault up the bluffs. The psychological arc of the assault troops followed a brutal progression. 6:30 a.m. Confidence. The bombardment will have destroyed everything. 6:45 a.m. Shock. Nothing has been touched. We're being slaughtered. 7 a.m. Despair. This is impossible. We're all going to die. 7:30 a.m. Paralysis. Nothing left but waiting. 8 a.m. Inspiration. If that general can do it, so can we. 8 a.m. Determination. We're going up that bluff, or die trying. 9 a.m. Breakthrough. Against all odds. It's working. Anchoring evidence. The reversal from disaster to victory can be measured in hard numbers. 6:30 a.m. 0 Americans off the beach. 7:30 a.m. Barely 100 men huddled against the seawall. 8 a.m. First penetration of the bluffs. 9 a.m. 600 men on the high ground. 10 a.m. Multiple exits secured. Noon continuous movement inland. 6 p.m. Beachhead secured. Casualties told the price. The first wave, 50–70% losses in most units. Company A, 106th Infantry, 96% casualties. Total Omaha Beach casualties that day, about. Yet, without Cota's intervention, the tally could have been total failure. The German view confirmed it. At 8:35 a.m., the 352nd Infantry Division reported enemy penetrating at Colleville. At 10 a.m., enemy has taken heights at Saint-Laurent. By noon, cannot hold without immediate reinforcement. Beyond the tactical victory lay deeper truths about leadership and human nature. Cota didn't just issue orders. He shared the danger. He didn't just command. When he found a wounded soldier unable to move, he stopped under fire and called medics. When engineers lacked explosives to breach a wall, he spotted a bulldozer tank stacked with TNT. No one dared drive it under fire. Cota barked, "Hasn't anyone got guts enough to drive it down?" A young soldier stepped forward. Cota slapped his back. "That's the stuff. God damn it, get moving." This wasn't reckless bravado, it was calculated leadership. He understood men had to see courage before they could find their own. Private Robert Sales, of the 11th 116th Infantry, captured the human truth. He wasn't Superman. You could see he was scared too. His hands shook, lighting a cigarette. But he did it anyway. That's what made us follow him. If he could, we could. June 6th exposed the collapse of U.S. Army doctrine. Everything taught at West Point and the Command and General Staff College failed on Omaha Beach. Doctrine said, massive firepower ensures success. Reality, firepower failed, human courage succeeded. Doctrine said, detailed planning prevents confusion. Reality, plans became irrelevant in minutes. Doctrine said, technology guarantees victory. Reality, only leadership determined outcome. Doctrine said, generals command from safety offshore. Reality, Sutter leading the assault saved the day. Colonel Charles Canham, commanding the 1116th, wounded 4 times, later wrote, every tactical manual, every exercise, every assumption was wrong. We succeeded, because one general threw away the book and led from the front. Even the enemy noticed. Oberst Ernst Goth, commander of the 916th Grenadiers, reported at 7:30 a.m. Enemy attack failing. By 9:00 a.m., they have broken through at multiple points. He admitted the change was inexplicable. Later, he learned a general had personally led the assault. This explains everything. The most remarkable fact emerged only after the war. Cota had predicted all of it. On June 5th, aboard USS Charles Carroll, he told his staff, the landing lant won't go in on schedule. Men will be landed in the wrong place. Some won't land at all. We must improvise, carry on, not lose our heads. This wasn't pessimism, it was realism. He had studied every amphibious assault in history. None had gone to plan. More importantly, he had trained for chaos. In England, he drilled his men in broken field running, maneuvering through confusion, adapting to collapse, blowing wire under fire. Lieutenant Jack Shea recalled, the general had us practice chaos. Everyone else practiced perfect landings. He made us practice everything going wrong. We thought he was crazy. Turns out he was the only sane one. The impact reached far beyond D-Day. Immediate. Omaha secured by nightfall, 34,000 troops ashore. Link to Utah and British beaches established. German counterattack thwarted. Strategic. Normandy consolidated. Allied build-up on schedule. Liberation of France assured. Long-term. U.S. doctrine rewritten to prize leadership over firepower, flexibility over rigid plans. The Ranger motto, Rangers lead the way, immortalized his words. On June 29, 1944, Cota was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for superb leadership, personal bravery, and zealous devotion to duty. Many, including historian Stephen Ambrose, argued he deserved the Medal of Honor. Campaigns continue to this day to honor him posthumously, but the true legacy lived in the men who survived. Thousands owed their lives to Dutch Cota. They returned home, raised families, built careers, all carrying the lesson of Omaha: one man's courage can reverse disaster. Military records prove it. Before Cota's intervention, 6:30, 7:30 a.m., 0 penetrations, 90% pinned at seawall, command collapsed. After his breakthrough, 8:30 a.m., gaps blown, men moving. By afternoon, 5 exits secured, artillery observers on high ground, naval fire coordinated, German defenses unraveling. 50 years later, June 6, 1994, survivors gathered again. Among them, Jack Shea, Cota's aide, now 74, standing where he had expected to die. He told veterans and families, what I remember most wasn't the noise or death or fear, though God knows there was plenty. What I remember is one man standing when everyone else was lying down, one man walking when everyone else was crawling, one man saying, follow me, when everyone else said, it's impossible. General Cota didn't win Omaha. We all did. But he showed us how. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Leadership isn't giving orders, it's going first. Shea looked across the cemetery's 9,387 white markers. Each stone marks a life ended too soon, but also a victory earned through sacrifice. Cota showed us that from disaster can come triumph, that defeat is only final if you accept it. That one man can make the difference between catastrophe and victory. Dutch Cota's story is more than history. It is truth etched in blood. Planning has limits. Technology is not decisive. Leadership must be seen. Individual actions ripple outward. and rank or age mean nothing when lives are on the line. From Normandy to every war since, soldiers, cadets, and leaders study his example. The motto, "Follow me," is more than words. It is Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944. And one general walking upright through fire. The collapse of rigid planning and the triumph of individual initiative at Omaha Beach transformed American military thinking. Special Operations Forces, who prize flexibility and personal courage, study Cota's actions as the embodiment of their ethos. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Raiders, all trace their lineage of values to a general who lived them before their units even existed. In 2004, on the 60th anniversary of D-Day, survivors gathered once more. Former Sergeant Bob Slaughter, 11th 16th Infantry. I've had 60 years to think about that day, 60 years to wonder why I lived when so many died. The only answer I can find is Dutch Cota. He gave us the courage to do what seemed impossible. Former Captain John Ryan, 5th Rangers, the magnificent leadership of a few officers like General Cota, who put their lives on the line when the chips were down, saved not just lives but the entire operation. Without his breakthrough, Omaha fails. Former Private Felix Brahm, 11th 16th Infantry. I named my first son Norman after General Cota. When people ask why, I tell them, because without Norman Cota, there would be no son to name. Cota's reversal of Omaha carried profound moral weight in an age of mechanized slaughter. He proved that character still mattered, that courage could still decide battles. His actions forced timeless questions. What makes men follow a leader into near certain death? What transforms paralyzed troops into fighters? How does one man's example ripple through thousands? The answers lie not in manuals but in human nature. Men followed Cota because he never asked them to do what he wouldn't do himself. They found courage because he showed them it was possible. His example spread because courage, like fear, is contagious. Chaplain George Wood, who landed with the 29th Division, later reflected, "I saw men die that day and I saw men transcend death." General Cota showed us there are things worth dying for, and more importantly, things worth living for. Duty, honor, the man beside you. He reminded them they were not just soldiers but moral agents, capable of choosing courage over fear, action over paralysis, victory over defeat. Not all assessments are uncritical. Some argue better planning might have prevented the need for desperate heroism. Critics point out that Cota's own warnings raise questions about why preventive measures weren't taken. Colonel S.L. Marshall, official Army historian, wrote, "While Cota's personal courage was beyond question, the fact that a general officer had to personally lead assault teams indicates a fundamental failure in planning." British observer Brigadier David Belloc noted, "The American tendency to celebrate individual heroism sometimes obscures systemic failures. Omaha required heroism because of intelligence errors, planning mistakes, and tactical missteps. Such critiques have merit, but miss the deeper truth. War is chaos. No plan survives contact with the enemy." Cota's genius was not in preventing disaster, but in recovering from it. He understood that adaptability, not perfection, wins battles. The true achievement at Omaha was psychological. In just 3 hours, American soldiers shifted from paralysis and defeat to determination and victory. That mental transformation, sparked by one man's example, proved more decisive than all the material advantages the Allies possessed. Private Harold Baumgarten, who began the day expecting to walk ashore unopposed, ended it as a combat veteran on the heights above Omaha. In his memoir, he wrote, "I went into the water a boy. I came out a soldier. The beach was our crucible, and General Cota was the catalyst." The transformation reshaped the Army itself. Before Omaha, it clung to the citizen-soldier tradition, the belief that American spirit alone could overcome. After Omaha, it learned spirit required leadership. Courage needed example, and victory demanded sacrifice. Omaha's salvaged success shaped the 20th century. Without it, the invasion might have failed. German forces could have concentrated on other beaches. The Allies could have been thrown back into the sea. The war in Europe might have dragged on for years. The Soviets might have swallowed all of Germany. The Cold War's map would look very different. But because Omaha held, Normandy was secured. France was liberated on schedule. Germany was forced to fight on 3 fronts. The war in Europe ended within 11 months. Western Europe was freed. NATO was born. The post-war order that shaped the modern world was born at Omaha Beach. Historian Max Hastings observed that the margin between victory and defeat was razor-thin, and Cota's intervention tipped the balance. It is no exaggeration to say that the course of modern history turned on one man's courage in one morning. What history often omits is the personal cost. Leading from the front meant accepting death as likely. Cota had a wife, Connie, waiting in England, and a son, Norman Jr., serving as a pilot. He had every reason to preserve his life, yet he risked it again and again. After the war, he rarely spoke of D-Day. When pressed, he said only, "I did what any officer should do, led his men." His modesty obscured the extraordinary nature of his actions, for not every officer could or would have done the same. Cota retired on June 30, 1946. As a permanent Major General, he lived quietly until his death on October 4, 1971, at age 78. Buried with full honors at West Point, his grave is marked by a simple stone giving no hint of the greatness beneath. Connie, his widow, later said, "Dutch never considered himself a hero. He said the heroes were the ones who didn't come home. But I knew, and we all knew, that without him many more would not have come home." The reversal of disaster into victory at Omaha Beach offers timeless lessons. Lesson 1. Prepare for failure. Cota succeeded because he expected chaos and trained for it. Leaders must plan not only for success, but for recovery when things go wrong. Lesson 2. Lead from the front. In crisis, visible courage matters more than perfect plans. Men must see bravery to find their own. Lesson 3. Individual actions matter. One person's courage can inspire thousands. Never underestimate the power of example. Lesson 4. Flexibility defeats rigidity. The plan failed, but adaptability prevailed. Lesson 5. Character is decisive. Firepower, numbers, technology favored the Allies, yet they nearly failed. Character and courage made the difference. On June 6, 2014, the 70th anniversary of D-Day, fewer than 50 veterans of Omaha, now in their 90s, returned to the beach where they had once expected to die. The keynote was given by James Shea, son of Cota's aide Jack Shea. He read his father's final letter, written before his death in 2011. "I am the last of Cota's staff, the last who remembers him not as the legend, but the man." He was afraid that morning, just like the rest of us. His hands shook, his voice cracked, but he did his duty anyway. That's not legendary, that's human, and that's what makes it remarkable. He showed that heroes aren't those without fear. They are those who act despite fear. Leaders aren't those who send others into danger. They are those who go first. Victory doesn't come from overwhelming force, but from refusing to accept defeat. Every generation faces its Omaha Beach, a moment when disaster looms and leadership is required. The question is not whether such moments will come, but whether someone will stand up when they do. Cota showed that one person can make the difference. One person can turn disaster into victory. Today the beach is peaceful. Tourists stroll where machine guns once reigned. Children play where men fell. But for those who were there, it will always be the place where they discovered what they were capable of, when someone showed them the way. General Cota didn't just save Omaha Beach. He saved his men from themselves, from fear, from defeat. He showed them how to win when winning seemed impossible. That is his legacy. Not just victory, but the knowledge that victory is possible, even in the darkest hour, if someone has the courage to rise and say, "Follow me." The final accounting of Omaha tells the story in stark numbers. 34,000 men landed on June 6, 43,000 by D-POS 1, 100,000 by D-POS. Casualties, roughly 2,400 on D-Day, 4,000 by June 7, 2000 during the Normandy campaign. Achievement: 5 miles of beach secured, 10 square miles seized on D-Day, 1,500 square miles liberated by D-POS. France freed in 85 days. Cota's direct impact: the first penetration at 7:50 a.m. and 600 troops on the heights by 9:00 a.m. 5 exits opened by noon, the entire beach secured by nightfall. Historians estimate that without his breakthrough, another 5,000 and 10,000 casualties were likely. Evacuation was possible. The invasion could have failed. The war might have dragged on for years. Hundreds of thousands more might have died. Today, Cota's name lives on in bridges, halls, and camps, but his true monument is not in stone. It is in the principle that leadership means going first, that courage is contagious, and that one person can turn disaster into victory. Every officer who learns to lead from the front carries his spirit. Every soldier who finds courage in chaos echoes his example. Every ranger who repeats their eternal motto carries his words. On June 6, 1944, Norman Daniel Cota arrived on a beach where defeat seemed certain and death probable. He found men paralyzed by fear, pinned down by fire, betrayed by failed planning. Through personal example and raw courage, he transformed them into victors. The lesson is eternal. Victory is not inevitable, but it is possible, even in the darkest hour, if someone stands up and leads the way.